I welcome you to the 47th International Film Festival of India in Goa. Today we are present here for the master class on costume designing by Rosalie Varda. May I please request our programmer of IFFI, Mr. Milind Joshi, to kindly escort our guests, Ms. Rosalie Varda and Asim Chabra, to the stage. A round of applause, please. I also remind you to kindly switch off your cell phones or turn it on silent mode before the masterclass. Thank you.
So, folks, I'm not going to read out Rosalie's bio because I haven't prepared that, but I think you are in for a real treat because just a brief conversation I had, she's been working as a costume designer in French cinema as well as in theater. She comes from a film family also, we'll talk about that. She even acted in some films. But at the master class, this is going to be a very, very special experience because she's going to walk you through not just her own work, but other French filmmakers, including her father, Jagna's work, which is a very well-known filmmaker. I'm sure you've seen some of his very well-known musicals and other films. So we'll spend about an hour and a half looking at some clips. Rosalie will describe each of the films and to give you an idea about what kind of costumes are designed in French cinema and the thought that goes behind it. And I think that's the most precious thing about the masterclass. So Rosalie, welcome. We're really happy to have you here in India. Welcome to Goa. So before we start to look at, just give me a sense of your mother, you were Agnes Varda's daughter, your father is Jacques Demy. You grew up in a French, your brother Matthew, right?
Yes.
And he's an filmmaker
actor
also?
And he's a film director.
Film director, yeah. So from your childhood, from the early childhood, you were in a world of cinema and theater also then. But tell us about how that influenced you to become a costume designer.
Well, I come from a family of cinema, so my childhood, for me, it was totally normal to be with actors and to be with film directors, and I was very lucky to have a very cultural childhood. So, it's very difficult when you do a masterclass because I'm always interested in who comes to a masterclass. I mean, what kind of, where do you come from? When I do some masterclass in Beaux-Arts school, art school or fashion school, then, I really know that the people are studying fashion or are studying art or studying cinema. So, first of all, before beginning, I would love to know if there is a fashion designer in the audience. Or is there a costume designer in the audience?
Maybe filmmakers. Oh, great. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
And are there any filmmakers, young filmmakers, or...
Good.
So all filmmakers obviously are interested in costume design at the end of the day.
And there's students from cinema studies?
Oh, that's
good.
Great.
Okay. So, for me, my childhood was like a fairy tale because, of course, like a lot of little girls, I used to really, love costume, and with, what I would find in the house, I would do a dress of princess or a dress of things like that. So really, my childhood was a kind of a normal childhood. But when I got to 15 years old, 16 years old, I was, able by the culture of my family to see a lot of films, to go to theaters, and my education was really done in museum, was really done in reading, in going to see theater plays. So for me, the big connection was by my education. That's why I think, if you have the possibility to go and see in museum paintings and sculpture, and if you're able to read a lot about art, this really was the base of my work. So after I finished high school, I did an art school for 1 year to prepare, me to go to a high fashion school where I stayed 3 years and did really the studies of how to cut a costume, how to sew a costume, but not only that, how to, I would say, look at a painting, look at a costume, and try to understand how it's made, why it's made, and how the composition of a painting is done. So I think the base of this is really, I feel I was like a, like a sponge. And in the sponge, you could put a lot of information, or I was like a computer, and you could put a lot of information. And really, I really started as an assistant, like mostly of, you always start by the base. And I was lucky, of course, I was helped because I was from a cinema family. So my first, internship was, on my father's movie. It was a period costume. It was, I was 20 years old, something like that. So I was helped, but I always say, in the beginning, you can be helped by your family. But at one point, if you don't work,
yeah, exactly.
if you're not serious, it's only will be a little bit.
Yes.
But it will stop. So then I really worked very, very hard as an assistant for several years of a very good costume designer, a man called Christian Gasque. And while I was an assistant, I began myself to do costumes. So then I did movies, theater, opera, commercial, photo design, art direction. And after all this, after, I would say, when I was 45, I began to be interested in doing other things because I felt that I went a little bit through of all what I could do. So I began to do sets, and then 15 years ago, I began to work for the Cannes Film Festival where I'm a set decorator and I construct places and take care of a lot of events for the Cannes Film Festival. And beside of that, I do, I'm a curator for exhibition and I do books. So I think the evolution is interesting in your own life to have an evolution of what you're doing. And this is for me now, all what I have done before, I can use it in another job. I can use it in a new experiment. I think in getting older in age, what is very interesting is that everything you have done is rich for you.
Right.
And you can give it back in another way,
Right.
So I feel I'm very lucky. So this is my a little bit in introduction.
Before we look at the clips that you have, which is I'm very excited about, I'm just curious if you can give them an idea when you meet with a film director or a theater director, and they talk to you as their costume designer. What kind of a conversation you have? What kind of questions you ask in terms of?
Okay, so this is always, very interesting, and you're right to say. So for me, it's like that. You have a story. So it's a screenplay. It can be a theater play. It can be the pitch of a commercial. It can be a pitch of a video clip, anything. You have the story. You read the story. Okay. Then you speak with the director, the film director, and he is going to give his, I would say, what he wants to do of the story. Because the story is not so important. It is important, but it's how you give the story. A filmmaker is how he will share the story. If it's a love story, we have a lot of love stories. What is interesting is how you will describe this love story. What will be the film? So the conversation with the film director is, I will give a basic example. It's a couple. Okay, it's a couple, a man and a woman, and they're married since 10 years. That's not a good information for me. The good information for me is what is their job, what is their culture, from what the class background, what is the object, and why he's interested in this love story, and who is this woman, and I need to know the history of this woman. I need to know what the filmmaker had in mind of before the film. If, let's say, I don't know, what job she's doing, the family background, and everything. So I get into his world. A costume designer has to go in the world of the filmmaker, in the world of the story. And then we work with the design department, with the production designer. So, it's not only a costume. I always say the costume is not alive if the actor doesn't feel it's his costume and if it doesn't fit with the background. So you have the story, you have the work with the production designer, with the filmmaker, with the director of photography, you know, because you're not going to do the same costume if, let's say, to give you an example, the film will only be at night, okay? So it will be dark, okay? So if you put a black costume, you know that you will never see anything. So you have this kind of conversation, you know? And then what is important is not only the costume, but the image, the background, the meaning. A costume gets alive when it's worn, how you say worn?
When you're wearing it.
When you're wearing it, you know, otherwise the costume is dead. So the costume has no point if it's not being on an actor.
It has to be lived with the actor.
It has to be lived with the actor. So, you know, this part is very important. And then when you decide, let's say, he needs a red T-shirt. Okay, a T-shirt, okay, but what is a T-shirt? What is the shape of the T-shirt? What red is it? What material is it? Is it new? Is it old? Is it used? Is it a little bit too little because you know, the character has taken weight?
Right.
Or if it's too loose because the character has lost weight? Or you have questions that are really interesting of a basic T-shirt can give you a lot of information of the character. You know, I think it's what I always say when I go in fashion design school. I say, you know, a nice dress or evening gown or tuxedo is easy to do. What is not easy is to do everyday live costume. This is much more difficult because all the information are given by, you know, the physics of the character, and half of his work as an actor is done by the hair, by the makeup, by the costume, by the jewelry, by the shoe, and by how he will behave. Will he work fast? Will he work slowly? So the costume designer is not only costume, it's trying to get all this together for the actor.
No, I think it's really interesting because, you know, as a script writer, the director writes a script, whoever, you describe the characters somewhat and you write the dialogues, etc. But when people see the film, the first thing the costumes makes the character come alive.
Yes, because it's the first image that you have of a character. So the first image is like, and now you have to know, you know, okay, oh, she has long hair, she has a dark dress, she's very skinny, she looks sad. Maybe the character is this, you know? And maybe another, you have a man, he's beautiful, he's handsome, he has a nice shirt, he's a kind of a sexy boy. Okay, so what's going to be the story? Oh, you see? So I think it's very important to define what is the meaning. And you cannot do one costume for one costume. You do what you see on the screen, you know. So it has a relationship. You cannot think, I'm going to do a nice costume for him because he's the main character, and all the rest is going to be shitty. You know? It's not possible to work like that. You work like a painter, in effect. You have a screen, and you work with the film director and with the production designer, and you see everything. And everything is supposed to have a sense. Okay?
Yeah.
It's supposed to have a sense.
It's, you know, in our Bollywood films, often there'll be a song sequence, and the lead actor and actress will be wearing very beautiful, colorful clothes, and everybody in the background is like very drab. But that's not real life.
No. So then we will talk about different, you know, case, you know. So, but to start with, I thought it would be interesting. I'm going to show you films where I did not do the costumes, okay? But I think it's interesting to explain how you work, you know, and how, and you know, and how different type of costume designer work, you know, because I always say this incredible story. Maybe you know who is Luciano Visconti. He's an Italian film director.
Yeah, Visconti, yeah.
And he did a lot of period movies. He was very refined, and he was very precise on what he wanted. And in some of his films, he asked the production designer to put real period costume in a cupboard that was closed, where you could not see what was inside. But he said, for the Guépard, for the film Le Guépard, I don't know how you say in English.
But the effect for the...
The Guépard is Le Guépard is a Visconti film with Burt Lancaster and Claudia Cardinal. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
so
the leopard. The
the leopard, yeah.
Alain Delon
And
also,
and
yes.
he said to the production designer, in the cupboard, on the table, I want period cloth, period costume. And the production designer said, but nobody's going to see what's inside the cupboard. And he said, you know, but the actress, Claudia Cardinal, she will be in her bedroom, and she will know that in the cupboard there are the other dresses. And I thought it was very interesting to have a relationship, to think that because of all what is around you, it will influence for an actor what he's going to do. So this is maybe too much, But I always say it's interesting to see how filmmakers have a different relationship with production design, with costume, So my point of view is that costume designers are not here to be historical. Our job is not to do a reconstitution for a museum. Our job is to reinvent something that would have the taste and the idea of what we want. Real costume, like historical period costume that are in museum, are done for the museum. Our job is an artistic job. So that means if we do a period costume, it's not necessary to redo exactly the period costume. What is interesting is to give to the actors, to the film, what can help them and what will be good for the story. And you have really different type of costume designer. Mm-hmm. Some costume designers are really like, we have to do the historical reconstitution. The costume has to be really how it was. And then you have other costume designers, like me, where we think it's important to share and that the audience can be helped for the story. Mm-hmm. And beside of that, the bodies, our bodies, in the 21st century, are not the same than at the Middle Age, 18th century, 1920s. So we have we have to understand that this evolution makes no point of view to redo the historical costume. Like in the 18th century in France, people were much smaller than what we have in France now. So if you go in castles and you see furniture, you're always very surprised to find that the beds are very small. But because people were much smaller, So it's the evolution of the world and our human evolution has an evolution on costume, And the second fact too is that fashion, street fashion, high fashion, has an influence on cinema. And you can see it in Hollywood films or even in European films. I'm sorry because I don't know enough Indian films if it has an influence or not, right. But it has an influence. Yes. So I hope I answer the question.
Yeah.
So
look at the clips?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to begin. So this is the first film that my father has done in 1959. And just before the clip, it's an adaptation of a theater play. It's a very short clip. It's not that you can see the story. It's just after that I'm going to explain to you what I find interesting. Can you get down the light? Can you get down the light? What is interesting, it's a theater play that has a movie adaptation, film adaptation. And the production designer decided that the walls would be like one color, like a flat color, red. Why red? Because, of course, in the story, this woman is alone in a bedroom and she's waiting for her lover, okay? And the lover will come, at the end and just would say, I quit you. I leave you. But it's a 20-minute film, and it's really interesting how you can design, really the screen, like really very precise. And it's stronger because the walls are red. Mm-hmm. And if on the wall there would be, I would say, little flowers or, little things, mm-hmm. then it would be like, we don't know. But by the color, we already know maybe it's a little bit dramatic, but I find it interesting.
Mais j'ai bien peur que ce genre de douleur-là ne mérite aucune considération.
Get the thing down.
Dans une de ses dernières lettres, ma mère m'écrivait « L'amour, ce n'est pas un sentiment honorable. » Mon second mari me conseillait « Tu devrais bien vers 50 ans écrire une sorte de manuel. J'apprendrai aux femmes à vivre en paix avec l'homme qu'elles aiment. Un code de la vie à deux. Je suis peut-être en train de l'écrire. Mes anciennes amours. Comment on gagne, comment on apprend à t'écouter.
Okay, so this is a film where I have done the costume. Is an adaptation of a very famous French writer called Colette. And I worked a lot with the production designer. It's a 1927-28 period film. And we were very interested, the both of us, so the production designer and me and the costume, to work together on the wallpapers and on the costume. Yeah. And you have seen
very similar.
They are similar on the color. They're not similar on the patterns. But the idea was really to be coordinated together. Like if she would get into the wall, because the story is that she's writing in her house, and nearly all the film is in her house. And I thought it was very interesting to look at the French painter called Matisse, that has done a lot of very beautiful, colorful paintings and collage and things. And we were inspired by him, and then he has done those wallpaper that were painted, really for the film. And I have done costumes that are related to them. And so this is really something that I really find interesting, that there is a relationship. It's not just an old dress. It has been designed for it, And that's what I like in working with a filmmaker, So next clip, you can see.
De quoi vis-tu en dehors de moi?
De peu de choses. De peu de choses et de vous.
Tu fais pas un lobby riche?
C'est à moi de l'estimer.
Oui.
Quelquefois, quand on n'avait pas le temps de me recevoir à Paris, je me disais, tant mieux. L'envie de la voir me passera plus vite en ne la voyant pas. Je n'ai qu'à patienter. Et quand j'y retournerai, elle aura tout un coup 60, 70 ans. Alors la vie redeviendra possible, et même agréable.
Et puis?
The same idea of what is on the wall, and the relationship with the costume. So, in her bedroom, she was alone, and the colors are very violent. And the second scene, she's with her lover, and suddenly she's very sweet, because she wants the relationship to be okay. And with the production designer, we worked really on wall patterns that are very more sweet. And her dress is in velvet and and silk, and similar color. And it's only lila and blue, light green, and it's all really chosen together. Okay, so next clip is my father's movie that he has directed in '64, Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Maybe this film some of you have been
Tiens, qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est pour toi. C'est Roland qui te l'envoie. Mais je ne peux pas accepter. Fais ce que tu veux.
Okay, so this is very interesting because this is not a film I have done, you know, it's 64. But the costume designer, Jacqueline Moreau, had found a material for the dress with flowers and everything. And when Jacques Demy saw this, you know, pattern, he said, oh, it's beautiful. It's really, it's totally what I wanted. And then the production designer said, well, why don't we do a wall pattern that is related to the dress? So it's really funny, but it's to explain to you that sometimes the costume can help the design, the production design, and sometimes the production design will help the costume.
So in this film, and I've saw it a long time ago, did she have many scenes in her room?
No, it's different scenes, but I chose that just to explain that the relationship between, you know, a filmmaker, a director of photography, a production designer, a fashion designer, is related.
Yeah.
Because you can invent something altogether. And sometimes the costume is the start for the others.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes it will be the production design that will be the start for the costume. Like if a production design say, I want it all gold, then me as a costume designer, I'm not going to choose the gold as the color of the dress. Otherwise, you don't see the dress. You know, so it's really to make you understand that this is a work of a crew together to get to an aesthetic. You know, so you're not obliged to like it,
Right.
but it's their choice.
Right.
You know,
right.
and has a purpose for the
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Okay.
Ma bague de fiançailles, elle est affreuse. Ce bracelet, il est importable. Personne n'en voudra. Et ton collier, mon collier, tu crois? C'est un crime, non jamais je ne m'en séparerai. D'ailleurs, il est sûrement faux. Allons donc, après tout, il n'est pas si joli que ça.
Okay, so this is the contrary, you know. The wall pattern is flowers, and the costume in front are plain, only one color. It's to understand that in the same movie, there's an evolution of the costume. The costume is not something you've done at the first scene and it doesn't move till the end of the film. It has a relation and it's an evolution in the film. So, you know, for the mother, it's the contrary. She's very strict. She has a red, you know, tailleur. And here in her bedroom, the walls have flowers. And the relationship of red and pink. Here in India, you are very extraordinary on the colors. It's really something, you invented the colors, you know. But in Europe, we're much more shy with the colors. Sometimes we don't dare to put, you know, a red and a pink with a yellow. But you see, in this film, the production designer and the costume designer really accepted to put bright colors together and not be afraid, you know, to be like a painting.
Yeah.
You know, and I find it, I think maybe that's why you can still see the movie today and you're still interested in the aesthetic.
The costume, the production design really, and the singing, I mean, brings the film totally alive.
Yes.
It is so joyful.
Yes. I think for an Indian audience, it's something
Yeah,
that
no, this is a great film, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
you could find it on
Yeah.
YouTube, some little
yeah,
clip. And
Bollywood has tried to copy this
Yeah.
often, I think.
So this movie, I've done this movie in 1983, and the story is taking place in 58 in the city of Nantes. It's in Provence in France. And it's a musical film. And I wanted to show it to you because this is typically, this character is a kind of a crazy man, very weird and crazy. And he at the end of the film, he wants to kill his wife. And he has a shop of television. Okay, so it's totally absurd, and it's like the story. And with the production designer, we thought, we needed to put him in his craziness. And the craziness maybe was by the color. So his shop is green, and he has a green costume, which is totally crazy. I mean, not a lot of men are, having a green costume, So if you see it already, you think, oh, that's not normal. There's a problem with him, And this is, okay, I think when you see the film, you don't say to yourself, oh, he's crazy, he has a green costume, he's a weird man, he's going to kill his wife. No, but unconsciously, to have that weird costume, you're going to think, oh, yeah, maybe his character is not so easy. Yeah. And I think if the audience feel that, then I have done my work. Maybe. So here, what is interesting is we're outside, but we painted the wall in purple, and we put paper, comment on dit, une affiche, a poster, but it's a little bit turned off. And the guy has a yellow polo, which is totally absurd, and she has a kind of a lila dress and pink lila dress. So this is outside, and in the story, it's a reality. But what is interesting for me in this is that we recreated a reality. It's not the reality of the street. It's the reality of this story taking place in 1958 in France. Yes, but because what is interesting is that it's very, those two yellows don't go together, but that's why it's interesting. And you have the purple, which is a flat screen of color, and on the other side, you have the reality of life, which is the shop, which is the window of the shop. So you have the both things in the same scene.
Il y en a plein les rues.
Alors François, protège-moi, mon François, serre-moi contre toi.
So it's the same thing, on the other side, the posters are very graphic, have been redone. So it's really to give you an idea of those posters are the poster of the strike, because it's the story of workers in a boat, comment on dit, where they construct boats.
Boats, yeah.
Yeah.
Shipyard.
Yeah. And the workers are on strike. And it's the story of this man, a worker that is on strike, and this is his, fiancée, and she wants to marry, and he doesn't want to marry because it's a strike. So behind him, it was the posters of, the workers and the syndicate and the thing, and it's very graphic. I don't think it's really like that in real life, but it doesn't matter. We're in the story, and in the story, it's very graphic. Okay, so this is a film I haven't done. This film is from 1966. And I choose this exactly for the question because this is outside. So how do you do outside to get it so aesthetic that everything in the street is exactly like you invented it? Well, then you repaint the street. And in that case, with the production designer, they had repaint half of the city. To get white. Why white? Because white is the main color of the film, which is very unusual because usually in cinema, director of photography, they say white is a bad color because it's too shine, it's too bright, it's difficult, and we get, next to the white, what do you do? And on this film, it was the contrary. They decided white is the base, and on the white we're going to put colors. So the rest is white with a little pink, but then when they go into the, into the city, all what they cross is always colors. And even on the walls, it's white, and suddenly you have one stripe of blue or one stripe of anything. So it's really how to reinvent the city. So it's, I think that, if you want to do it in a film and you want to do it inside, you can do it also outside. It's a bit, crazy, but I think it's possible. Stop, okay. So this is a film I chose. This is, my education. I have seen all the American musical comedy, all the musicals, American, England, a lot of Indian Bollywood film too. But I wanted to show you La Belle de Moscou, which is a 1952 or 53 film, because for me, all those films were very important for me. And this is, for me, a perfect costume. I mean, it's totally beautiful. And I choose this one because I wanted to show you that it's very fakely simple. It looks simple, but it's very complicated. And Sid Charis is a very well-known American actress, and she was a dancer, and she did a lot of musical. We call her Long Legs because she had so beautiful long legs. And why I chose this is because it's very interesting. It's done in studio. So this is a fake place, totally fake. But the fake place has been designed by the production designer as a real place. So you see the wall is a little bit old and it's scratched. It's the contrary of what we have seen before in my father's film. So they do in studio the reality, okay? So the reality is the stairs are not so bright, the walls are a little bit, old. The door has been painted like this. And inside of that, there's a musical which is totally not real life, because of course you don't dance to say something, so. But I wanted to show you that this costume for me is really the perfection. Means it's, of course, you don't find a skirt like this in a shop. You don't find a sweater like this. You don't find a belt. You have to do it by, a special tailoring. But for me, I mean, the circle of the skirt is a double circle, and it gives, the shape when she's dancing. And the fact that the top is where you don't see her skin, I find it much more sexy than if you could see a lot of her, skin, and you have little open, arms and jewelries. And for me, this is, absolutely beautiful. And it really had a lot of influence on, after, for me in costume, to see these American movies, because they had a very high perfection and a high tradition to put costume design really in front. What is very interesting is that in American films, when you see the title, and then you have the production, and then you have a film directed by, and then you have costume. You never have this in other culture of cinema.
Why?
Because in America, there is a very high tradition of thinking that costume is very important. And if you look at old films, usually costumes are in the front. And after you have director of photography, and after you have art direction. But it always made me smile, is that costume designer in Hollywood, when they begin, after the silent production, were, you know, hired by studios. And you had huge stars that were fashion designer that, you know, they would do like 10 films a year, 12 films a year, but they were in front after the film director, which is never the case today. Never. You know, you're at the end. If you're at the beginning of the film, you're lucky. This is the film that made me decide to do costume. It's the Jean Renoir, Le Carrosse d'Or, and you know, it's 18th century period costume. And this costume, I was 15, I think, when I saw the film. Can you continue? And when I saw this film, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this job. I want to do this job. This is perfect. This brown, this black, this jewelry, the white, it's just modern. It's not a historical costume from the museum. It's the costume designer reinvented that period. Okay. This is a film of Jean Cocteau of 1948-49. So of course, I did not do the costume. I was not born. But I chose, it's a very beautiful story about a young woman and a young man. They meet and they're not supposed to love each other. Okay. And what I thought very interesting in this film is how the costume designer decided that the both of them would be similar costume. Man and woman, woman and man. And you don't really see it, but you know, he has a white shirt, she has a white shirt. He has a kind of a sweater with no sleeves, and she has a dress with no sleeves. And it's the idea of, if you're in love with somebody, can you melt in the same costume? You know, what is a man costume? What is a woman costume? Is this difference going to be absurd? And this film is really interesting in the relationship of, you know, man and woman. And Jean Marais, who's the actor, he was the lover of Jean Cocteau. So he was homosexual, and he never went out with a woman. But in this film, their relationship of love is really interesting. And they are like the two are feminine or the two are masculine. And it's the question is typically how the costume gives you a clue of the story. So it's really a black and white film, very aesthetic film. So they are, you know, on the boat, on the water. So it's totally, you know, not reality. And you know, she has blonde hair, he has blonde hair, and they are nearly the same. We don't know who is who. Can you continue? I thought it's very interesting.
Enfin, j'ai été assez bête pour croire que vous aviez compris qu'il ne s'agissait pas de mon oncle.
So for me, you know, the aesthetic in film is very important. So I'm always very touched when I see the big reflection on the work of what has been decided for the costume. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is because I want to do an homage at the American musical, you know, that just got me in joy from my age of 6 till now, you know, and Fred Astaire is just joyful. Why I show you that is because I have done the costume of the last film of my father, and there was a part in the film that was a musical part, and we did an homage, you know, at the American musical. Okay. So now we have it. Okay. So now it's my costume. It's not the. So, you know, it's how you give the taste of that period. You know, like the girls are in black and white because I thought it was more fun to not put them in colors because it was an homage at all that period movies, you know, and but with little sparklings on the dresses, and it's all what we dream when we're a little girl, you know.
So in a French film, usually you would not have men dancing with top hats.
No,
it's very American.
It's in the film. It's a stage performance.
No, I understand that, but usually French films would not do that.
No, we don't have that culture of musical films. Yes. You know, my father was a director that was really interested in music and in musical, but globally the production of film in France are not musical. Mm-hmm, that's true.